first thing happened was I remember waking up feeling so incredibly peaceful. Like I felt safe.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking your body is a barometer of your peace. And I had never ever heard this anywhere else. And I didn't even realize I had the level of anxiety that I had every time I would look at my phone, or every time the holidays would come around, or every time, my husband was a topic of conversation, or when I felt so unseen on a weekly basis and criticized and humiliated. And all of a sudden, all of that was gone. And it just felt like I was floating.
Imagine growing with all odds stacked against you. No healthy models for love, safety, or connection. A life that seemed to be steering you toward repeating the same painful patterns. How do you create a different path? One that not only breaks the cycle, but feels fulfilling and deeply yours. Today, I get to share a conversation about resilience, self-leadership, and choosing something new for yourself. I'm joined by Franceska McCaughan, a two-time best-selling author and successful entrepreneur, whose story is a testament to what becomes possible when we refuse to accept the narrative we were handed. In this episode, Franceska and I talk about her memoir, SurThriving, healing childhood trauma, going no contact with a parent, and the role boundaries play in protecting your peace. Franceska shares how she radically changed her life and how she now helps other women do the same. You won't want to miss this episode. Hello, trauma brains. I'm Raysa, a trauma survivor who lives with complex PTSD. And I created this podcast because I know how confusing and isolating healing can feel. Welcome to Hello, Trauma Brain. Here we talk about the ups and downs of healing complex trauma, boundaries, coming to terms with the fact that people I love were abusing me, and what it looks like to heal one slow and tiny step at a time. If you're living with C-PTSD or supporting someone who is, this podcast is for you. Welcome, new and returning trauma brains. I am so glad you're here. Before we get into this episode, quick reminder, I am not a licensed therapist or mental health professional. Everything shared here is based on personal experience, and this podcast is not meant to replace therapy or medical support. If you think you might have C-PTSD or any other mental health conditions mentioned here, please reach out to a licensed professional who can support you. Any people, services, or resources mentioned in this episode are not sponsoring Hello Trauma Brain, and the views shared by today's guest are their own. Also, this episode may mention trauma or topics that may feel activating. If at any point you need to pause, take a break, or skip the episode completely, please do what is best for you. All right, let's get into the show. Today's quick check-in is that I can't believe that it took me until season 3 to figure out I could greet you with the name of the podcast. But here we are. Also, this is the first time I am doing a full video episode. It is an experiment. It feels super daunting. I'm not gonna lie, it feels very intimidating and exposing to come on here and be fully seen. I feel like I have been hiding behind the thumbnails and graphics this entire time, and I rarely do face posts. And the only times I've done video is if there's a guest there. And in my brain, the way that worked was I'm doing it for the guest, to bring value to the guest, and to show up just as myself and solo feels a little weird. But basically what happened was I had to delay the production of this episode by an entire week. What happened was I had technical difficulties. I like cleaning up the audio in terms of the minute details. I had done the whole audio, I cleaned it up. And then when I combined it with the video, there was like nothing I could do to save it. It was so out of sync. It was frustrating. And instead of beating myself up and forcing myself to put something out when the episode was clearly not ready, I decided to hold off. And I've been doing some research on editing with Riverside, which is the platform I've been using to record the guests. And in learning more about the platform, I realized that I might be ready to start transitioning towards video. So I decided to do this test because the solo parts are just the what I call the sandwich parts of the episode, the beginning and then the end parts. And it's a little bit less recording. And yeah, I'm using this as an experiment to see how I feel about the process. Feel free to tell me in the comments how you feel about the video format if I were to switch to that. And yeah, I'm going to sit with how I feel about this episode and decide. I will say, I don't know what happened if I press record and then accidentally press stop, but I actually am recording this section again because it did not did not come through. And yeah, that's where we are at. Now, let's get into the episode. I am so thrilled to introduce Franceska Marie McCaughan. Franceska is a self made entrepreneur, best-selling author, and speaker who supports women in leading themselves with confidence, clarity, and a deep sense of inner alignment. She has created and scaled businesses across the world, including a floral design company and the platform known as the Hotel Florist, which became the first mentorship of its kind in the floral hospitality space. Over time, her work has expanded into something much more personal and soul led through her company, Goddess Millionaires. Francesca uses human design to help guide women into becoming the version of themselves who trusts her desires, who honors her truth, and who allows herself to take up space. Her memoir, SurThriving, Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Poverty, Abuse, and Trauma, traces her lived experience of choosing to create something different for herself and her lineage. And what moved me about her story is the way she shares it, knowing that healing is not about erasing what happened, but creating a life that holds all parts of you. Now, without further delay, here is my conversation with Francesca Marie McCaughan. All right, survivors. I'm so thrilled to introduce to you finally to Franceska McCaughan. Francesca, thank you so much for joining me here for this conversation today. How are you feeling?
I am feeling so good. I already know this conversation is gonna change lives. I can just feel it.
I love that. It's so great to have you here. I wanted to dive in and start asking you about a lot of the stuff that you speak in your memoir, Thriving, and ask you how did you realize that addressing your childhood trauma was going to be so important for your personal growth?
I love this question because I think, especially for a lot of listeners, I wasn't sitting around going, I have unresolved childhood trauma. And I wasn't sitting around going, how do I heal myself? In fact, I probably spent majority of my life refusing to go to therapy, refusing to do something about it because about quote unquote it because it felt like they quote unquote won and now I have to like fix something that was never my responsibility. So my way of coping was just literally out running, outperforming, outworking, out earning, and just really trying to show the world how worthy I was. And society really appreciates that. It rewards you back saying, wow, look how fancy she is. Look how successful she is. Like how much money she makes. Look at her business. So it wasn't until the pandemic happened where I found myself in my closet for 2 weeks. And that's actually why my memoir stops in 2019, because it was like a whole nother chapter I've been on the past 5 years. But I remember being in my closet, literally thinking, am I a nice person? Am I a funny person? Like, why would people want to be my friends? And I had no sense of who I was without those really beautiful billboards. So when someone asked me, like, how did you know you wanted to heal unresolved childhood trauma? It really came from a place of wanting to become a better leader. And I just thought, well, there's no way that I could actually help other people if I don't know how to help myself. And that's literally was the first step it took to start leading me down the road of personal development.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so relatable because I feel like a lot of us who survive abuse and in cases where there's narcissistic abuse, there's this core sense of self that just doesn't fully develop. And a lot of the work is like going back to discover like what is the essence of me? And I'm very much going through that as we speak right now. And I found it so helpful to I haven't finished your memoir yet. I've been reading Sort Thriving, and as I read it, I wonder like how was it to sit down and write your story?
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I would say if anyone is on the fence about therapy, like I think therapy works really well for people and I'm very pro therapy, so I would never want someone to walk away with a different impression than what I'm about to say.
Mhm.
But sitting and writing your story for the world to read takes a level of commitment and reparenting for your inner child that I just feel like therapy could never give you. And when I wrote the memoir, it was in a true old Franceska fashion, which again was let's prove to the world that I can make the impossible possible. And I told my editor when I hired her, I said, I want to write this in 4 months. She literally
Wow.
laughed out loud. And she said, if you can do this in 4 months, like, I'll be really impressed. And I'm like, great, because that was what fueled my like drive, I guess, which overrode my fear. And then when I quickly realized it wasn't going to be 4 months, and in fact, it took me 2 years, it was really humbling. It was like, okay, wow, we can't actually outrun this. And I'll never forget there was a summer when I was writing, and that entire summer, I just had debilitating migraines. And it felt very humbling because you're constantly going back to versions of you, situations that, is a big difference between reliving it and revisiting it. And your nervous system is so delicate. And at the same time, you're trying to keep up with normal life. Maybe you have a partner, maybe you're raising children, maybe you're running a business, maybe you're trying to get your next promotion. So it's almost like you're living these two lives. And it wasn't until probably three-fourths through the book when I started just closing my eyes and I would just ask the younger version of me, what was it that she was never seen for? What was she never told? What did she really need to voice at that time? And it
Mhm.
really helped me. And as much as I wrote this book, it was really all the different versions of me that wrote through me. And it was one of the most healing gifts I could ever give myself. But it's been 2 years since I've published it. And I'm just now to that level of confidence where I'm like, okay, I can talk about this. Because before it was like, I wrote it and then I felt like I kind of had to run away and hide for a moment because it's not something you're wildly proud of. And it's so bittersweet. You're so proud that you owned your story, but then you still have hope for a better past. You still wished it turned out differently. Why aren't you writing a book on some kind of insane success because you invented some sort of like life-changing cancer solution, for example? I would say anyone that's going through something like this, thinking about writing their story, sharing it with the world,
Mhm.
it is so important that you are delicate with yourself during this process because it's like an onion. You're going to remove so many of those layers. It's going to happen very quickly, but ultimately it is going to get you to that level of peace and love that you've been searching for your whole life. You're going to give yourself that through this process.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna sit with that for a moment. That's so good, and I love how you're introducing this concept of like being gentle with ourselves, especially when if we're thinking about writing our story, or even if we're processing what happened to us. I feel like even as someone who is not writing a memoir right now, I sometimes think about it, and I feel like little ideas, like if I were to write it, this would be part of it, but I want to go back to this concept of like therapy and inner child work because I feel like it's so important. And in my experience, the therapy that I've done many modalities at this point, I could like write a book about that alone. But I feel like the therapy modalities that were not addressing inner child work were not effective for me. And now I found a therapy modality where there is child work integrated into the work. I wholeheartedly agree that that has been the missing piece that has led to a lot of the growth I've done recently. And it's really interesting because I can only imagine what it is to like come to terms and face what happened to you and then to also put it out for the world to see and how much of like that can even change how things feel for you. And I'm curious to hear, like, since you've published the memoir, how do you feel your inner kiddo has been feeling about that process, and how is she coping, and how are you both coping with this?
I would say in the very beginning, it was kind of like, good job, sweetie, keep it up. Like we did that, let's go tell the world. Like we finally did it. And I remember, and I want to be clear, like my mother is still very much alive. And I had technically a smear campaign that happened on the internet during this whole process. So it felt like mama bear, like, okay, we have to protect the little version of us. We have to still remember that she's doing a great job.
Mhm.
But again, I found myself, I actually was on a podcast and went viral. And I woke up one day and my DMs were full of people that had similar stories. And my first thought was, oh my God, I don't know how to handle this. And I wanted to get back to these people. But then I just kind of never did. And then I would see the messages being, unsent. And then that really struck a nerve with me. And I thought, okay, at this point, I need to just take care of me. I can only imagine you're trying to do a triathlon and you spend, a year training for it, and then you do it. And then there's kind of like this weird empty phase of, how do I fill my time? Do I want to do another one? I need to go to physical therapy because my knee doesn't work anymore. It was like I needed kind of a reset.
Mm-hmm.
And now I just found out something that was very traumatizing to my inner child yesterday. And that was that I've been no contact with my mother well over 2 years now. And I saw her home go up for sale yesterday. And I was so devastated. The little girl in me was so devastated because it kind of felt like the last link of, you're never going to be a child again. You're never going to be in that home again. My intuition was, I was supposed to inherit that home. That home has been in our family. I was third generation.
Wow.
And because I don't speak to her, because there's no repair, then I lose out, quote unquote, lose out on my inheritance. But I felt like even as a kid that I wanted to, quote unquote, restore it to its glory. And you have to really check yourself with your adult mind. Whereas it's like, does a child really think that this home, that this asset, that this piece of real estate is going to restore some sort of glory to what was always a very broken home and a very broken relationship?
Mm-hmm.
So right now, being less than 24 hours post that, it's acknowledging that things are raw, bringing your loved ones into your world. So like my husband, telling him how I feel, making sure I'm taking space, taking extra magnesium, having discussions like this, not allowing things to fester in silence, because this is where shame really starts brewing. So when it comes to healing your inner child, it's remembering that your adult mind can reparent your little child in a way that they never had when you were actually a child. That has helped me a lot during this process.
Wow. I firstly want to say I'm so sorry to hear about the home going for sale. That would be such a big trigger. And I'm so proud of you because within 24 hours for you to realize, okay, this is happening. These are really big feelings for my inner kiddo and for me. How do I take care of myself? And like reaching out and still showing up here. Thank you for doing that
My
alone.
pleasure. I mean, it's more important than ever, especially to have conversations like this.
I 100% agree. I am no contact with my abusers as well. It's going to be 3 years in November. And it's interesting that to even hear you saying that, because I don't think I realized basically the home with a lot of stuff happened. It's also like completely gone. Can never go back to it unless I just drive through it or something like that. And that happened before I even started this work. And I don't think I had realized, oh, wait, like that's going to be another thing that I have to grieve, because I can hear Patrick Tehan saying things like the inner child just holds on to this hope that we can get it right. If that one thing happens, like in your case, I can hear your inner child being like, if we can get the home back one day and make it our own,
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to feel good. And it's so hard because the inner child is just trying to fill this void that's there. You sound like someone who's done a lot of work and is able to work with your inner child on not needing to fill that hole to feel complete and to feel good enough. I feel like that's the main thing that a lot of us struggle with, that I'm not good enough. And if I can get that one new milestone, then I will be. And then you get there and it's like,
You're still not good enough.
yeah, that's right.
And then it re-solidifies the belief, I will never be good enough. Let me try
That's
again. Let me jump further. Let me take on more risk. I think that's why also a lot of childhood trauma survivors are in debt, or they're in, very abusive relationships, or their little girl. I always say, like, the little girl is running the show, or the little boy, who is driving your vehicle in life.
mm-hmm,
And I think especially when it comes to legacy, this can be quite triggering, because, and this was something for me. It was like, okay, let's be sad. Like, this is really sad. Let's not gaslight how we feel. And also, let's not make decisions from this place. So, if ultimately we feel like we're losing out on a piece of legacy, what is the legacy we want to bring to fruition? Is this really it? Do we want to inherit what we imagine to believe is legacy? is our version of legacy like a million times bigger than this? And what if we took that same energy that we are afraid we're going to lose out on and actually invested it into the legacy that we want our children to inherit? Like, which one's going to feel better? And again, I think that's part of the reparenting process of the little inner kid, is not invalidating how you feel, allowing yourself to feel really big emotions, not allowing yourself to make decisions, because the little kiddo is going to have like a knee jerk reaction. Because let's face it, we grew up in a knee jerk kind of world, for survival. We didn't sit around and think about how we should avoid abuse one night. We just had reflexes, and it still shows up in our nervous system today. So allowing yourself to feel big feelings, talking to your little kid, reminding them that I can totally understand how you feel like that, but that feelings aren't facts. Let's get through this process. Let's get really clear on where it is that we're going before we make any decisions. And time is always on our side.
Hmm.
We don't have this pressure of having to force ourselves to make really big decisions that affect us, affect our children, affect our partners. And it's okay to be selfish like that, because nobody's going to live your life for you. Nobody lives in this body besides you.
I love that. And what makes me think about is like the concept, and this is something I'm working in therapy right now, the concept of self protection. Because the concept of self protection often, at least for me, it was, if you are protecting yourself, you're being selfish. You're being, you're not following the rules. You're being an inconvenience. You're being a burden. Like, you should be following this and not get out of that box. And we do have this birthright to protect ourselves. And I want to circle back with the no contact, because that going no contact with a relative, with a parent, that's super taboo. Like, if we were talking about an abusive partner, there's a little bit more of, okay, of course, like, get out of there, leave that person. But when the title of the person is mom, dad, or anything that's, like the family realm, all of a sudden all bets are off,
Yeah.
and they get this get out of jail free card and this pass, and nothing they do is like, it never merits to other well, this is to some people, let me say that it doesn't tend to merit the no contact. And I want to fight on that, because for me, no contact has been like life-saving, and it has led to a better quality of life. And it's been the hardest thing that I've done. It still is. I don't think it will ever get easy, honestly. But I wonder to hear, like, from you, like, going no contact, you said it was 2 years now. How does it feel to go no contact, and how has that improved your life in any way, and what's challenging about it still?
So yeah, it's been almost 2.5 years. And I feel like if I didn't have the initial reaction that I had, it probably wouldn't have been so quote unquote easy for me. So the whole process started because I was writing my memoir, and I had tried to
Mm.
invite my mother to the conversation. Again, the little girl in me thought, we can beat the statistics. We can, show the world how it's still possible, because without a doubt, my mother had a very, very difficult time. I'm sure she had her own version of difficult childhood. I can't speak on her behalf, but there's a lot of human things that happened to her that the adult brain has understanding and compassion for, perhaps the way she was able to parent. And I wanted to invite her to a conversation to say, okay, let's heal that. Let's put that behind us, and let's basically heal in our lineage, and like, but have it be healthy. And that option really wasn't available. And so I decided to go no contact. I'd never done something like this before. By the way, there's not like a handbook on it. And
No.
I wrote a very clear message. I gave an end date. It was like, I think initially it was supposed to be like 4 or 6 weeks long. I was very clear. I wanted to make sure the memoir was written from a really squeaky clean place. I didn't want to have any kind of influence from maybe like current situations with her that would make me maybe write the book a little bit different. And I just wanted to have, I didn't want noise. And the moment I put the no contact in, two things happened. The first thing happened was, I remember waking up feeling so incredibly peaceful. Like, I felt safe.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, your body is a barometer of your peace. And I had never ever heard this anywhere else, but I like was no, and I didn't even realize I had the level of anxiety that I had every time I would look at my phone,
Yeah.
or every time the holidays would come around, or every time, my husband was a topic of conversation, or when I felt so unseen on a weekly basis and criticized and humiliated. And all of a sudden, all of that was gone. and it just felt like I was floating. And I thought, "Oh boy," my first thought was like, "I don't want the 6 weeks to end."
Yeah.
Now the flip side happened where all the boundaries were crossed. The police were sent to my house. The smear campaign started. Numerous family members called me, texted me horrible things. And I thought, geez, why would I want to disrupt my peace for this person? So I remember, I think the deadline was like August 15th. And I remember the deadline came and went. And I just thought, I'm not ready. And I think it was like 2 or 3 days later. And at this point, because I've had peace and because I've had separation and I've just kind of written off the fact that the family is crazy and, they're going to believe whatever she says because she's the mom.
Hmm.
I started to doubt myself. I started to doubt that it was really that bad. I started to think, well, maybe I'm the evil one. Like, how could you do this to your mother? She's in her 70s, blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget, I got an email. And I don't know how this email came through because everything was Fort Knox blocked. But
Hmm.
this one email came through, and it was all the words that she had told me as a child. Basically, she wished that I was never born. She was wasted on me as a mother. I was like a slimy, slithery snake, all kinds of just really crazy things. And I'll never forget, I had never hit a reply button so fast. And I just said, this is exactly why I went no contact. And at that point, I just thought, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And I've tried to talk about it a couple times, but again, it just didn't feel right. And so that's why I'm happy we're having conversations like this. It's kind of like when you talk about, sexually transmitted diseases or, these things that we're supposed to feel like a lot of shame around. It's like
Hmm.
if you have a toxic person in your life, that is a very much them problem. It is their decision for whatever reason, whether it's medical or non medical related, whether it's addiction or drugs, doesn't matter. That is a very them problem. We now live in the day and age of the individual. We live in a brand new paradigm. It is okay to choose safety for ourselves. And I just started telling myself, I'm like, I'm revoking everyone's all access pass. Just because we share blood, just because one day you decided to get pregnant does not mean that I have to keep you in my life forever if you did not earn a spot in my life. And I think the more we can normalize that, I think the less toxic family systems we would actually have.
Mm. Okay. Francesca, you just dropped the bomb. So many great things here. Let me pull something that honestly, if you put it on a mug and sell it, I would buy it. Your body is a barometer of your peace. Let that sink in. Our body knows. And I can feel that in my body. Even like hearing you say that's like, yes, that's exactly right. Like I can feel, I can still remember the feeling of like the pit of my stomach just dropping when I would just answer the call or call them on the Sunday like I used to do every week. And the anxiety, like the pressure on my chest, like our body will catch up before our minds do. And in spirit of normalizing this conversation and also in spirit of modeling what trauma survivors need to hear when they're making these decisions. Like we do not need to hear how bad they had it. We do not need to hear how they're the mom or the dad or whatever. What we need to hear is you have a right to set the boundaries that you need to feel in peace. You have a right to protect yourself. It is okay for you to absolutely block someone who's sending you horrific things over an email
Mm-hmm.
or who humiliates you and puts it down every time they get a chance. Is not okay for them to be treating you like that. And I think something that infuriates me is that we tend to get the questions, and I rarely see people go back to them to go, hey, that's not okay. Like, why did you treat them like that? Why did you talk to them like that? Why did you send that fucking email? Let me just for a moment, let me put a pin on the email because I have seen in my experience, they have a tendency to not fucking help their case. They'll put the thing on writing, you know? Like, you now have this email. I
Yeah.
have so many emails, Francesca. I have emails I can go, that is what that one person sent me. And yes, that is why I blocked them. And then I didn't even like try. It's baffling to me that they have the audacity to feel entitled to writing something like that. And that nothing is going, hey, we probably shouldn't be sending that. And instead they send it and they double down on it,
Mm.
which is crazy making, you
Yeah.
know?
I think, something that, I mean, I firmly believe that our souls came here and chose this version of life as a human vehicle to fulfill some sort of karmic duty. And I genuinely believe that there's a lot of souls out here that were meant to be the industry disruptors, the lineage breakers, cycle breakers, whatever you want to call them. And I think abuse, especially if we look back in abusive families, was so acceptable and like integrated. I mean, you have to think about this is like integrated in our DNA. Like we have a reflex. And when I think about that, my grandmother was abused, when I think about my mother was abused, that I was abused, the abusers, because they didn't have the level of awareness, their soul didn't come here to break the cycle, but ours did. They don't feel this remorse. They don't feel this sense of responsibility or desire to repair because in their woundedness, they feel entitled to making sure someone knows that they're hurting them because they can't go and actually do that to their abuser. And this again is why I think there's a lot of enablers in toxic families.
Mhm.
And while I say that with so much compassion and love in my heart, because by, like you said, like going no contact with a parent is devastating. It
Yeah.
is essentially like mourning someone who's very much alive, but they're dead to you.
Mhm.
But it's what you have to do to have a healthy life. And when I thought about if I wouldn't spend like a second away from my daughter who would be with my mother, if I didn't feel safe with that, and I don't even have a daughter, I have 2 cats. I wouldn't even leave my cats with my mom.
Mhm.
Why the fuck am I like spending time with my mom? And,
Right.
and we have to just get really honest. So I think again, it's new paradigm of the individual. We're no longer in the paradigm of the tribe where, we need family as survival, we need community, quote unquote, takes a village to raise a child. All of this stuff was very real until we had the day and age of the internet, until we had the day and age of women making more money than men. It's like so much has changed in our evolution as humans that part of that growth and evolution is taking responsibility for our lives and saying, hey, safety is really important to me. My body is a barometer of my peace, and I'm going to remove the people that do not make me feel safe. And
Yeah.
in the very beginning of this process, I thought, well, maybe if I could tell more family members, they might actually see it from my perspective. I might get some sort of validation. I might feel some sort of like confirmation that I'm okay and that, of course that happened. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but I got the complete opposite. I mean, I remember telling someone it took all the courage in my heart, and I'll never forget. They literally said that, I think it was like, that sucks. That was the response. And I just thought, how am I spending my life?
Yeah.
Like, I think actually I need to remove all of these people. So the reason why I'm so forward about that is because especially as women, we feel guilty. We feel like we don't have the right to do that. We feel like even this morning, I told my husband, I was like, there's a part of me that doesn't feel like a good daughter. I'm like, what the hell is a good daughter? We have to just start checking ourselves. Again, who's driving the car? Is it little 7-year-old version of us, or is it us in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s? Like we control our life.
Yeah. Gosh, I I have to say, just like listening to you talk about this, so validating, and I think this needs to be normalized because I'm with you. I've been reading your memoir. Let's start there. I've gotten to read still, not the whole thing. It's right here, everyone. SurThriving. Beautiful, beautiful cover, by the way.
Thank you.
I can tell you from what I've read so far, and it's not the whole thing. It was that fucking bad. Like she's monstrous. The stuff your mom did to you is unspeakable. Like it's unspeakable, and I'm glad you spoke about it because you are not the only person who gets treated like this. And I feel like a lot of us carry that shame, and it's incredible what we can find when we realize that we're not alone. This is happening to other people, and it's not okay. The fact that it's happening to other people doesn't make it normal, doesn't make it okay. Like I feel like that growing up in Puerto Rico for me, it was a thing where everybody was treated the same way.
Yeah.
And it was just in school, everywhere. Like there was no safe place, even in the church. And because it was so prevalent, it just became the normal. And it took for me to get out of there to go, wait a second, like this is not this is not okay. This is not how people should be treating themselves or treating other people. And sure, do I also feel compassion all the time? I feel like most of my therapy is it that bad? Am I being cruel? maybe I should have tried a little bit harder, and like reminding my inner kiddo that like we've tried for 3 decades, over 3 decades, trying time and time again.
You shouldn't have to try.
Right,
This is the
right.
other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And even with all that I did, like, if anything, it should have been fucking sooner. It should have been, like, a decade before that. I had moments a decade before that where I could have been like, "This is I'm bouncing. I'm bouncing," and I didn't bounce because I was so in it, and I feel like that feeling doesn't quite I don't know that it ever quite fully goes away, but I think the practice is still choosing ourselves and our peace and our well-being at the end of the day.
Yeah, and look at it like this, because I think also being trauma survivors, it's very easy for us to slip into shame that we're not like doing enough, we're not trying hard enough. We should have left sooner. And that does nothing for us except make us feel really shitty. I look at it like this. Just because the feeling goes away of I feel guilty, maybe I should try again. Let me go save the house and restore it to its glory. Whatever the narrative is that our brain wants to show us that day. It's remembering that we can't take just one everything shower. We can't just take one 30-minute hot shower, wash, shampoo, condition, deep moisturize, shave, all the things, and just
Yeah.
never have to shower again. Like, I don't care how amazing that shower is, that one shower, guess what? You're going to have to shower again tomorrow. And it's totally fine. Like, it doesn't mean anything about your showering capabilities. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean anything about the shampoo you're using. It's just that's how it is. And so when you can kind of take the sting out of, hey, you're doing it wrong, and take your power back, as in every day it gets to be a choice. Every day I look forward to the shower I'm going to take. Every day I look forward to climbing into my really warm bed and feeling super safe and knowing that tomorrow's going to be another fucking phenomenal day because I'm in charge of it. When I can come at it with that attitude versus I should have went to bed earlier. Imagine if I really prioritize my deep sleep better, like 2 years ago, I might have less wrinkles. You start realizing how that negative self talk, again, is just part of your healing process. And we don't necessarily need it to go away in order to have really amazing lives. It's just there. It's kind of like noise upstairs, listening to your neighbor. Yeah, it gets annoying at times, but if you focus on it, you're going to be more annoyed. And if you kind of let it be in the background while you're meditating, well, you're probably going to have a really good meditation. So it's remembering you're always in power of what kind of thoughts you want to have about your life, all aspects of your life, including this.
I love that, and I wanna highlight this concept that you're introducing about we can still live a good life, like our best life or the life that we are looking for, and we don't have to wait for the whole healing to be done.
No, because you're going to
Just
wait forever.
exactly, that's exactly right. I love that, and I wanna transition because I something that I've seen about you that I admire a lot and is very inspirational to me is how you have radically taken your life back and transformed it completely. Because you got set up for so many chaotic situations and to accept that over and over, and somehow you went from being a child that ended up in the foster care system, who didn't have running water, who was abused severely, and you now as you log in today, you have your own businesses, you have found a loving spouse, and from your Instagram, your life looks pretty good. And what I love about you too is that you keep it real though, even in your memoir. Like you're always like, even though you're sharing the wonderful things that happen in your life, you also are sharing the struggles. And that to me is like so real because it's not one way or the other. It can be both, sometimes coexisting together. And something that I heard you say recently on an interview was that back then people kept saying, you look like $1 million. But you said, I just wanted to feel like the $1 million. And I'm curious to hear what is making you feel like $1 million these days?
I just got goosebumps over my entire body. So, we think it's the money. We think it's the fame. We think it's a status. We think it's the followers. We think it's the people recognizing us on the streets. Like whatever the thing is, whatever we think the thing is that's going to give us the feeling. And I have learned it's not the thing at all. And that the feeling was always available to you. So, when I decided on this entrepreneurial journey, I've been now on this journey 13 years. I was like, I'm going to be the first millionaire in my family. That was like not even on my radar until very few years ago. Like I just wanted to have a successful business. And then I was like, what if I actually had like generational wealth like that? And then that felt like so scary, so beyond me. And then I thought, well, what does that actually feel like? Like, I know what it looks like. I could have some designer bags, have like whatever house I want, live wherever I want, nice car, whatever. But like, what would that feel like? And I actually started making that my mission, where I was like, how do I find beauty in every single thing that I do? And it's because for a big part of my life, it was just all about go, 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 survival mode, good enough, get it done, hustle, push, sacrifice. And I just thought, if I'm going to be a millionaire, I am assuming that I want to feel like how a millionaire wants to feel. And that is abundance of time, that is slowing down, that is finding the beauty in everything. I mean, I could find beauty in like raw fish at this point, and I do. I share it on my stories. Like, look at this amazing rainbow trout we just got from the fish farmer. And for me, feeling like $1,000,000 is not having regrets. So doing things that scare you, but the risk is so much bigger and more rewarding than the regret would ever be. And I find that a lot of us, especially if you've dealt with trauma, you develop a life where you will pick the fear of regret over the fear of rejection. So it's getting really clear on what areas of my life am I playing small, where maybe I don't want to be seen, or maybe I haven't accepted myself as good enough.
Mm.
It is having an abundance of time. So, like, what about my life? It started to be like, what about my life do I not like? And I had to create an avatar. My avatar was Goddess Millionaires. And definitely when I had this idea of Goddess Millionaires, I laughed out loud. I felt like an idiot because I was neither goddess nor millionaires. And it took me about a week to share it with my husband. I just remember being in the front seat of our massive Dodge truck because we were trailer lifing. We built a cargo trailer, lived around the US for 7 months. We'd never RV'd in our life. It was an absolute shit show, but it was actually one of the best experiences. And I remember just saying, hey, I think that I'm goddess millionaire. And even to this day, I have to do a little giggle because it felt so close. It felt like so me, but so outside of me. And I just will never forget. He said, well, that's exactly how I see you.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, so how can I be more feminine? How can I slow down? How can I take a little bit more time? How can I fall in love with my life just a little bit more? How can I realize that this is what I used to pray for? And it's as little as putting a heating pad underneath my fitted sheet in my bed so at night I get in and it's nice and warm and toasty. It's like, what are little gifts that I can give myself every single day when I make my smoothie and like pouring it into this beautiful wine glass and like taking a photo of it and then sipping it next to a window? I mean, we're talking about 5 minutes here, but it's this decadence where you're so hooked into your life, where you're turned on by your own life, where you're excited. And the moment that something maybe doesn't feel good anymore, then you release it. In the beginning, that looked like being Goddess Millionaires. And I would ask myself, what does she eat? What does she drink? How does she buy her clothes? What's important to her? What are the values she has? Because otherwise, I don't think I could have gotten to where I'm at today. And that really helps. So if anyone's looking to maybe they think that, oh, well, once I make an extra $100,000, I'll feel more fulfilled, or, the money problems will be off. So my husband and I will have a better marriage. It's like, what if you figured out how to connect with your husband today, without the money? Because I can tell you there's been I went through a huge financial death portal, and it was like one of the most humbling experiences. And I felt like it was almost a challenge to recreate what I had experienced as a child. And I just thought, you know what? I don't need that to feel good in my life. How can I fall in love with other parts of my life without that? So that when it returns, because I know it will, it'll feel like the cherry on top and it won't feel like toothpicks that I'm building my life on. And so for anyone listening, I just want to let you know that you really can fall in love with your life today. It's just choosing one little thing and maybe doing it a little bit different, a little bit more decadent, a little bit too much, and then just watch it compound and it'll take your breath away.
Wow. Okay. Let me highlight this whole thing. So, first thing, I am 100% with you. I love hearing this whole prioritizing what can you do today, what's available to you today, and going with that. Because a lot of us, and I definitely have done this, like future faking myself into I will have, if I can get to the thing, then I will feel the way I want to feel. And I've been discovering lately that actually, what if like feeling the way that I want to feel? Like, what if I embody that feeling today? That can open up the space, the energy, and the time that would allow me to get all these other things done. I feel like I have been, even with the podcast, like back when I started the podcast, you were one of the first people who reached out, your team, to pitch you as a guest. And I honestly like didn't feel very worthy of having someone who was being successful on Instagram. I was like, how am I gonna host somebody who has a memoir coming out and they are looking pretty good on the Instagram? And I'm like really fucking struggling here. I don't even know how to do a guest right now. And it took until a few months back and I was like, okay, like I think I need to start letting go of this feeling that I think a part of me when I get a guest on, I want to be as valuable as I can to them. So I would love to have like a bajillion of followers that can really amplify the voice of the guest. And it's like, okay, how do I just show up and have a good conversation with someone and enjoy that conversation and not have this pressure on me that I have to tick all these boxes before I'm worthy enough to ask someone to be on the podcast. I love hearing you say that. I am so glad that we're having this conversation today because I feel like this is coming at a really important time, especially as you are transitioning into a whole new phase in your, I'm going to call it in your millionaire goddess avatar life. And it is your human design work. And I'm going to be honest, I'm new to hearing about this. I've heard a little bit here and there. But for anyone who is also new like me, can you briefly explain what human design is and how can it help childhood trauma survivors?
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to 2020. I got to give you a little context.
Let's do
And
it.
it was the first time I had experienced it. I remember I was laying in the bath. I got a text from a friend who, ironically, is the one that wrote the little quote on the back of the book.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
it's very surreal to tell this story now. And I remember he said, "Hey, I feel like you should look into human design. I feel like you'd really like that." And let
Okay.
me just paint the picture. I was not a woo woo girly. I did yoga because I wanted to have a nice body, not because I wanted to be yin. It's just like I was not into astrology. I knew I was a Sagittarius and that was about it. So I remember I looked it up and I just thought, this is really dumb. I don't know what to do with this. And it's something about energy, and there was 5 different types, and my type was like 20% of the population, and my not enoughness wound was like, there you go. I'm only good enough for 20%. I'm not interested in this. Why can't I be a generator? Why can't I be a manifesting generator? They're better. And
Mm,
completely wrote it off. And then about 2021, maybe like a year and a half later,
mhm,
when I was really kind of lost, my floral coaching business was starting to take off. I was starting to coach women that I could really relate to. And it was scary because I felt like, oh my God, I'm not a leader. I'm a peer. How do I actually become a leader? What do I need to invest in? And then I'm going to write a book because that'll make me like more legit as a leader. And then suddenly thinking, oh my God, I don't even know who I am. And I said, okay, there was that human design thing. There was something about human design, and the whole thing apparently is it's like your blueprint of who you came here to be. And at that point, I was like, I don't have anything to lose. So it felt like grasping at straws. And I remember I looked at it again and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to need someone to decode this for me. This is way too complicated. So I hired a one on one coach and I said, tell me what I need to know. Don't know what I was expecting, but that 1 hour call, there was like 4 calls, but that first one, I felt my whole life just stopped. And I remember as soon as the call, I ran out. My husband and I were supposed to go to the grocery store or something. And I said, no, I need you to sit down. I need to tell you everything I just learned about myself. And I always say, like, when I do readings now with clients, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you anything about you where you go, no way. Like, I have a superpower. I had no idea. But I am going to find all of the things that you actually think are wrong with you that are actually your superpower. And you're never going to feel more seen. And I just did this with a client who was a generator. I think I was like 2 messages in and she just started crying and she was like, I've never felt more seen. And this is
wow.
the thing about human design is it is your unique blueprint. It's made up of 5 different sciences, from quantum physics to astrology to I Ching, Kabbalah Tree of Life. It is incredible. And There's 5 different energy types in our collective, and it's learning about how you operate as your energy type, but it's as unique as your thumbprint. So when I say energy type, I want you to think like zodiac sign. Like that really makes it superficial, but you can also grasp the categories you might be put in. So some people are meant to initiate, some people are meant to guide, are meant to like bring the ideas to life. Imagine a collective where we're all in alignment with our human design. I mean, it would be a utopia. So it changed my life. It helped me decode so much about my unresolved childhood trauma. It helped me come back home to myself and really accept versions of me that I thought was wrong. I didn't get it right. This is why I had the experience that I had. And I became certified in it a number of years ago. I think it's been like 3 years now. And I've just used it with private clients, like coaching clients, business clients. And it really helped them in their business. And then I thought, you know what? We need to bring this modality out where people can actually heal through it. It was a huge part of my healing journey. I couldn't get on board with a therapist. I got on board with writing a book in human design. And so now something I'm really excited about is to educate people to actually help them understand who they are. It's like driving a car, but having no idea how to change the oil or having no idea where the brakes are located or the engine.
Oh.
And it's like you need to know how to fix these things or like actually know, hey, you have a sports car and when you press this button, you go 10 times faster. And that is what human design is for us in our human life.
Wow, that sounds extremely meaningful. So I feel like for a lot of us, everything is a question mark. Like who are we is a question mark. How do we get to a place where we can start improving our lives? Another question mark. And I feel like things like this that can bring some language into the experiences that we're having. And what I like about it is hearing you say that a lot of us carry that toxic shame and those feelings of not being good enough, and a lot of the things like that, just everything is distorted our own perception. So like to have something that can be like, actually this thing you think is horrible about you, it's actually something that can be very helpful and it's a beautiful quality you have, can be so transformative, especially for those of us letting go of that toxic shame. Actually, I want to circle back to something you were talking about that I wanted to ask you about, which is your innate ability to look for beauty in anything. And I'll give a little bit of background because I feel like this question evolved a little bit based on what's happened in the last few days. So I sent you the questions ahead of time, which is a new thing I'm doing this season. Any guests from the previous seasons, you didn't get them ahead of time, so I wasn't doing it back then. But now I am. And I wanted to ask you about something I read in your memoir, SurThriving, which was when you were little, your mom had thrown away all these Easter eggs you got from school, and you managed to not only get them back, but you like managed to get them filled in with this fake grass, hid them for yourself, and went on a hunt in the morning the next day before your mom even woke up. And as I read that, I thought, man, this woman has been working with nothing this entire time, like making beautiful things out of thin air. And as I have seen some of your content, like it's very apparent to me that you still have that quality. And what I found interesting, and this is something I do all the time myself. So I'll throw myself under the bus here for a second too. I noticed that when I sent you the questions, one of your posts ramping up to this was that you were like, it's ChatGPT. I just used ChatGPT to do this thing the other day, and it looks like I'm a 5-star Michelin chef, but it was really the AI. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's doing the same thing I do, which is not take credit for it because you didn't have ChatGPT back when you were a kid.
No.
ChatGPT didn't tell you to get the eggs and fill them with grass and put them away. Like, girl, it's been you. It's been you
Yeah.
the entire time. And sure, we have tools now that allow us to make beauty out of nothing with a little bit more help. But I feel like you were born with this beautiful quality of looking at a situation, even the most dire one, and going, okay, how do I make the best out of this? And it is a beautiful thing about you. And can it be exploited by somebody who's an abuser? Yeah, you fucking betcha. But to see you take that quality and bring it to the things that you love doing, it's been beautiful. And the way I'm gonna throw myself under the bus and admit that I do this too is you said I'm going on this big podcast, and I'm like, what big podcast? Like, what I'm talking about here? Is there another podcast she's doing this weekend? And then you said the question. I was like, no, she's talking about mine. But it's so interesting to me how like we can still struggle with giving ourselves the credit that we're due for the things that we achieve. And I just want to let you know, like, I see you, girl. You work so hard, and I'm so proud of you for everything that you've done so far, and I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. It's been incredible. I didn't hire a coach or a mentor until 2020. I just was under the impression that if you
Mhm.
needed a coach or mentor in business, you shouldn't be in business. Like I was very
Ah.
lone wolf, very you either have it or you don't, like wore superiority like a badge of honor, and
Mhm.
then I think I took a year off, I don't know, last year, and I just thought, okay, a 3 line in human design is all about trial and error. And I thought, okay, I need to go and do some trial and error work. And only recently have I hired a new mentor, which I'm absolutely obsessed with and has definitely like taken me to the next level. But
Mhm.
one of the things she said to me on this topic, which I was like, of course you do, which her biggest thing is like, you make everything a big fucking deal. And I feel like I've done that my entire life. You just make everything a big deal. From a therapist lens, I really survived through imagination. Everything was in my imagination. I knew I had a client actually last year ask me, how did you go from like the life you were set up to have, basically being another statistic to being the woman you are today with the level of success that you have today, the impact that you've made today. And I just knew even as a kid, I didn't want that kind of life. So I just did everything the opposite way. I thought, well, I don't want to be angry and unhappy and not celebrate holidays. So how do I celebrate? And when I talk about this Easter egg story, I didn't even know this was a story until again, going really deep into that writing process, it popped up. I needed days to console that little version of me. And it was one of the most healing stories I wrote, but it provided so much light. And that,
Mhm.
I did find a lot of hope and beauty. And I do think that's a big reason why I've been successful in the floral design world. I mean, even my book, The Hotel Florist Profit Method, I dedicate it to the 6-year-old version of me that used to walk around the house in our native Texas fields and pick flowers and design arrangements for every room in the house, which by the way is not normal for a 6-year-old to design to scale, kitchen table, bathroom arrangement, and then to flash forward and become one of the most sought after hotel florists and now educate florists on how to land consistent income. Of course, it was always there. And then if I look at it from a human design point of view, it was one of my gifts. The soul chose this vehicle to do life with. It needed a certain set of skills. And that's why human design for me is so incredibly important because there's so many of us out there trying to operate with the wrong set of tools because we think there's only one set of right tools. And we're completely forgetting the tools that we actually customized before we even came to planet Earth to do this thing. So I'm grateful for your very kind words. And I also want to say that anyone that picks up on something like this and sees that in me means they also have it in themselves as well. It's just a mirror.
Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with that. I feel like the reason I can pick it up is definitely because I do it, like that self-awareness. Yeah. And I firstly, you're so welcome. And I did want to ask you because I thought the name of your memoir is fucking brilliant. Like we always think I've heard so much about like surviving to thriving, but like thriving, like to do both at the same time. It's I feel like this can mean so many things, and I'm sure the meaning of this have shifted for you. I'm curious to hear what does thriving mean for you today?
So when I thought of SurThriving, it felt like cutting something off. So when you're about to say surviving, but instead of using a V, you use a T. And like how much would that change your life? It's like picking a better feeling thought or adding the word and yet or but to your sentence. It's like breaking that pattern of negativity. And I come from a lineage of women that were proud of how they survived. And I think survival is a very admirable thing. I think I could probably out survive a lot of people. I mean, I did. I grew up in survival.
Yeah.
But that's not something that feels good. Going back to like how would it feel to be a millionaire? How does $1 million feel? It's not survival. It's not constantly looking over your shoulder. It's not waiting for the ball to drop. And so for me, it was kind of like that pattern break, like thriving. What does it look like to do both? What does it look like to still have survival skills, but your main focus in life is the thriving part? What does that look like? And for me, going back to like how I've intentionally co-created my life,
Mhm.
I live a life that I could have never imagined I would live, but I
Mhm.
always knew I would in a way, and that's why I say, like, your dreams are just memories from the future, and if you need proof, let's take you for example in this podcast that you're hosting. It is a big podcast. It is a big fucking deal because you're talking about
Thank you.
topics that most people don't want to talk about or pretend that don't exist. And just
Mhm.
because maybe it doesn't have the million and bajillion listeners today doesn't mean it's not going to have it in 5 years. And if you don't quit, then you win. I was talking about this today in the hotel florist. I got a notification that I made my 450th post, and just recently, I've had a lot of florists say, "Oh, you're so inspiring. What you created is so inspiring." I didn't hear that until 450 posts later. I didn't even start this company until I did 301 installs. And it's
Wow.
like, we think it's overnight success, but nobody talks about the 10 years where you were silent, where you battled self doubt, where you didn't know how you were going to pay your bills, where you felt stupid that you had these dreams and you didn't have proof yet. But faith is believing without proof. And so for me, when I think about SurThriving, I think about what was, and I'm very grateful for the skill set that I learned and what will be. And I can choose every day to focus more on the thriving part, the more of the thriving in life, living my best life, if that's my anchor, versus where I come from, which is look how hard I had it. Look how I'm barely making it. Look how the world is against me. I'm like surviving, like people like us, and I just,
Mhm.
again, going back to that little version of me, I was like, that's not a life I want to live.
Take a moment to sit with that. And I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. I definitely needed to hear that, especially these days. It fluctuates. Like there'll be times where like I'll get a good response to a post or something, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting there, and then like so fast, like a week later, you get not nearly enough, and it's like, oh no, what did I do wrong?
Mm.
And it's so true. There's something that I've been working on recently, and it's about allowing myself to have a process, to be a beginner, to have those mistakes, and like seeing mistakes as opportunities to learn something new, as opposed to seeing mistakes the way I used to see them, which is as a failure, as another piece of evidence that I'm something's so wrong with me, and like transforming the way I look at things. And it's really interesting for me when I see the name of your memoir. I think about just holding that multiple truths at the same time. Like I can feel compassion for an abuser and what happened to them, and I can also feel fucking angry that they took it out on me when I wasn't the one who abused them to begin with. I can feel like I am surviving some days and still feel like I can be thriving some days, and to like give myself permission to have a good life, a good enough life. Doesn't have to be a perfect life. It doesn't have to be anything that's what people deem to be the successful thing, but like a good enough life where I feel safe. Like that feeling you described earlier of like waking up in your room and just knowing that your abuser is not outside the door ready to fucking dump on you. Like you can feel safe and waking up and get yourself a nice glass of water, cup of tea, cup of coffee, whatever you have in your mornings, and just like take in that like things are not the way they used to be. And we have a right to feel that sense of peace. Like that's not something we have to earn, but something that is just our birthright from the moment we were born.
Yeah. And I think also I always say like the beauty of being an adult is that you get to choose. And I think as adults, we kind of forget that because again, like who's driving the car, which version of us, the child or the adult? There were so many times in my life that I just felt so helpless because I was a kid. I didn't have rights and who would listen to me? I didn't have anyone around to protect me. And I think it really is taking that power back. And anytime that I have had really low lows. And ironically, the really low lows came when I made really big declarations for myself. Like, I'm going to be the first millionaire in my family, or I'm going to start talking about unresolved childhood trauma. I'm going to write a memoir and expose all my dark, deep secrets to the world. Then all of a sudden, there was really low lows. And I remember the thing that has helped me the most is getting into a state of gratitude. And sometimes it's easier than others. Sometimes it takes thinking of 10 things and all of a sudden you feel kind of like juicy and glittery. And then sometimes it takes 10 minutes of just constantly finding things, even if it's like,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that the particles in my air are so clean that I can breathe them without worrying about my health. I'm so grateful that I have teeth. I'm so grateful that my toenails don't hurt on my feet. Like, just start thinking of every single thing that you could be possibly grateful for. Your whole vibration, like your body starts vibrating in this state where it's just like you have the utmost gratitude. And I can't tell you how many times the money wasn't there or the validation wasn't there. And it was just like, if I don't quit, I win. And if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. If it was easy just to record 100 podcast episodes and you were going to be the next Gary Vee, everybody would record 100 podcast episodes. Like, that's not hard, but you got to pick your hard. You're putting yourself out there. It feels vulnerable. You're no contact with abusers. People don't maybe fully know your story. You don't even know if you're fully ready to own your story yet. You're having big conversations. That feels really hard. So does working a very unfulfilled 9 to 5, questioning the impact you could have on this world if you actually had the guts to get in front of a microphone and open your mouth. Both are hard. So when we realize that it's not like one is easier than the other, then we just pick the one that we would have less regret for. And my whole life, and again, this is spoken as a true 3 line in human design, is like, I will do anything as long as it's not something I'm going to regret. And even when I was thinking about, and the other day I shared this on Instagram, it's like, I have a US registered trademark. Okay. This is a little girl that grew up below the poverty line without running water, went to a foster care system, almost had her life taken from her mother. She has a US registered trademark and is blazing a whole entirely new industry.
Mm.
I had no money when I applied for that trademark. I was scared. I didn't know how to pay my rent. I was paying rent on my credit card. My rent was way more expensive than it had any business paying for. But my business suddenly, overnight, it felt like basically went to zero. And I'll never forget speaking to the lawyer. And the lawyer said, look, we've thrown thousands of dollars at this. It's really niche. You got maybe a 10% chance. Do you really want to spend another 3, 4, 5,000, whatever it was at the time? And at that moment I said, no, you know what? Let's just withdraw. And I'll never forget, I hung up the phone and I said, are you really going to be defeated over $5,000? Are you going to go to bed at night for the next 20 years and wonder, like, if you had just put up the $5,000, if you would have gotten it? Would you rather have $5,000 and live with the regret, or not know how to pay your rent next month on your credit card, and maybe you'll get the US registered trademark and you've got 30 days to figure it out? You better believe I called that lawyer back and I said, file the trademark. If we've got a 10% chance, I'm going to go with it. I hired the best lawyer for this and we're going to make it happen. And guess what? It took 2 years, but
Wow.
now we have the US registered trademark. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it, but it's there. I don't need to know. I wanted to do it. I pay my rent. I'm still here today. I'm not under a bridge. So I think if we just remember that we're really fucking powerful, and if we don't let like our current circumstances paint some sort of bullshit story about as to why we can or cannot do things for our future, we're going to be a lot more successful if we just remember we're not available for regret.
Wow. That's extremely powerful, Franceska. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad you were able to get it too. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
I'm not available to not get it.
I want to be mindful of your time as we're wrapping up our conversation. I wanted to check with you. Is there anything you wish I had asked that I didn't, or did you wanted to add anything to anything that's been said?
I think we had a really great conversation. I would say, whenever we think of childhood trauma survivors, we think about people that slip through the cracks. We think about the people on the streets. We think about people that become addicts and end up in really abusive relationships. And I want to say there's a huge population out there, because childhood trauma affects 70% of our population. And it shows up with chronic pain, substance abuse, other toxic family depression. There's a big part of us that think that we've out-earned it or we've outworked it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really gaslighting ourselves. So if this conversation has opened up anything for you today, I would just really encourage you to start looking into something that you feel called to. For me, it was human design, but something in the personal development space that helps you connect a little bit more to who you are and not who you think you should be in order to be loved.
I love that. Thank you so much, Franceska. I also want to ask you something I asked from all the guests at Hello to My Brain, which is, if you could go back to a difficult time, what would you tell younger Franceska?
It gets so fucking good. Like, you have no idea. It's going to get so good, and you're doing a great job. And just remember that everything that you can think of right now that you're dreaming of are just memories from your future.
I fucking love that. Pun intended. That's so good. I also want to ask you, for anyone listening who wants to hear more about you, is interested in maybe learning about human design or checking out your content, what is the best way to connect with you and learn more about your work?
I would say come and connect on Instagram. Like, don't just follow, like, hit follow, send me a DM, say you've listened to this podcast, like, tell me what you loved about it. I talk about human design, I talk about entrepreneurship, I talk about unresolved childhood trauma. I'm a Texan living in Europe, so I share a little bit of my expat life as well. But Instagram, I'm always there. I love connecting with people, and I know we're going to include it down in the show notes because it's an 18-letter long name. So I'm not even going to spell it out for you.
Sounds great. And yes, it will be linked on the show notes for sure. I also want to attest to the fact that she does reply to her DMs. She's replied to me, so you'll be hearing from her.
I love it.
And Franceska, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me for this conversation and also recognize the work that you are doing, the work that you've done so far. You've taken odds that were so against you and you've made a life that is just remarkable. You have this innate gift to go after what you dream, go after what you can see for yourself. And I am so proud of you. I'm so glad that little Francesca and you were able to join me and my inner kiddo today. It's just been a delight. And thank you again so much for your work.
Thank you, Raysa. I had an amazing time. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So good to hear that. And I again want to say thank you for joining me here at Hello Trauma Brain. All right, Trauma Brains, checking in. How are you feeling after hearing my conversation with Francesca? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and stay tuned for the healing invitation for this episode. In this episode's healing invitation, I want to offer you a few things to reflect about that were inspired by Francesca. When I heard Francesca say, "Your body is your barometer of peace," I felt the truth of her statement in my own body. I invite you to reflect on how your body is your barometer of peace. Pay attention to your body this week and how you feel as you interact with people. Is your body sounding alarms? Do you feel peace? Perhaps you're not sure. Instead of decoding your body signals, start by noticing the sensations. Does any part of your body tenses up around someone? For me, I tend to notice a tightness in my chest and nausea sometimes. It takes time. But as you practice, you may start to notice the things going on in the background. No need to change anything. You are just observing. Please let me know in the comments how this episode's healing invitation goes if you choose to accept it. Before we wrap up this episode, all music and production is courtesy of yours truly. As a trauma survivor, I struggle asking for help and would like to practice here by asking you to help me support this podcast. You can subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you're watching. Share this episode with anyone you think might find it helpful. Follow the podcast on Instagram at Hello Trauma Brain. Subscribe to the Hello Trauma Brain YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when new episodes go live. And if you like, you can also make a donation via PayPal. Thank you in advance for your support. Even a little goes a long way in helping this podcast reach more survivors who could benefit from this content. No worries. Links to everything will be in the show notes. Thank you for joining me and Francesca today. We hope you found this episode helpful. I wish you the best as you continue SurThriving. It is time for our farewell affirmations. I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the belief that I am enough. I am lovable. And I deserve to heal. Thank you for watching. For those of you on YouTube, you can click on any of these links to check out more episodes and subscribe to the channel. I wish you a gentle rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.